Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. And avid listeners of the podcast will know this is my favourite episode of the entire year. I'm not sure if Archie can agree here, but this is one of my favourite episodes of the year. So it's one we're very looking forward to. It's one we're going to do in two parts, as we always do, where we are going to delve into every single driver's season. I believe there are 43 in the field this year, and we're going to delve into all of their seasons. We're going to unpick everything. We're going to cover all bases from every driver across the course of the 2024 season, and we will rank them in 5 categories, just like we did last year. I know last year we did 7, but we cut it down to 5 this year. So we'll go over that in a minute. And as always, I'm joined by Archie, and as we know, we tend to debate some stuff on the podcast, so we need the middle ground, a third person to separate our disagreements. So we're joined by one of DIVEBOMB's IndyCar writers. Welcome, Fleur, to the podcast. It's nice to have you on.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So a lot of IndyCar to chat, and as we said, like last year, we've got 5 different categories which we're going to rank them off. So the top one is billboard-worthy. These are the drivers deserving of being on billboards, much to Mark Miles' comments. Even despite Mark's comments, these drivers still deserve to be displayed on billboards worldwide because they were just that good through the course of the season. The second tier needs a bit of context. You think back to the Milwaukee press conference, Connor Daly asked Will Power if he has that dog. Now, Will Power didn't know what it was, but we certainly do. So our second tier has got that dog.
Do you remember what Will replied and thought it was?
Oh, something about being quick, like a dog's like fast or something.
Yeah, he thought it meant he could run fast.
There we are. A slight twist on last year's middle. We thought calling drivers mid was a bit mean, so it's now the middle, like Ohio, because it is the middle category. That was nice and logical. And the last two, very similar to last year's, bump day survivor, and then the bumped right at the bottom. So no NA this year. I have taken the executive decision that every single driver we will not make a single mistake for throughout the course of this recording, and they will be ranked somewhere, whether we like it or not. So without further ado, we are going to do the first half of this episode. The second half will come to you next week. We'll do like we did last year, we split over 2 parts. But for this week, we're going to go 43rd to 16th in the standings. There's obviously a lot of 500s only, a lot of part-timers, a lot of drivers who got dropped halfway through the season, but they still deserve to be ranked because they're still racing IndyCar. And look, who else is reflecting the Luca Giottos of the world? Absolutely nobody. And we're here dedicated to every single driver deserves their spotlight, whether it's good or bad. So the first thing I should do is share my screen, and we will come up with the list. As hopefully, viewers, you can now see on your screen now. Excuse all the adverts from this random company. But here are your 43 drivers to be ranked. So we start off with 43rd in the standings, Marco Andretti. It was only 43rd because he did one race, which, of course, as always, the Indianapolis 500. Absolutely everybody shocked. Marco competed in his own team's race. Well, there's not really too much to talk about. Qualifying-wise, Marco qualified 19th. He crashed, obviously, all by himself about midway through and ended up with a 25th place finish. Wasn't really spectacular by any means from Marco, was it?
No. He said that, I think he'd said it was the best car he'd had in about a decade at Indy. So,
which makes no sense because he got pole 4 years ago.
Yep, but I think in terms of drivability, this was as good as it's been. So I guess the way that it ended was pretty rough for him. He crashed about 10 times in that same incident and saved it, didn't save it, saved it, didn't save it, and then eventually it was quite light contact. But yeah, end of his day. So not spectacular.
And that's it. That's Marco Andretti's season.
Yeah, basically.
Marco is signed up to this one race every year. This is his focus every single year. He was slower than his teammates. I know he was quicker than Ericsson, but that's obviously a bit of a different story. And then when you do one race, when you crash up midway through, it's not exactly great, is it? Something we can really say about a season. When you put all your effort and all your goals and all your preparation to one race a year, crashing out of it midway through while showing absolutely nothing for the first half is underwhelming.
Yep. So are you suggesting he deserves to go in bumped?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he had nothing to show for it, did he? Unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know where else you'd put him.
So, Marco, you're going in bumped, unfortunately. That leads us on nicely to the next Indy 500 only driver, who is Ryan Hunter-Reay. Now, RHR put on a bit of a better showing, didn't he? He sort of surprised us all in the Fast 12. Made it sort of a really spectacular run the Saturday. The pace wasn't quite there on the Sunday, but that will probably be the highlight of RHR's year. Part-time team making the Fast 12 was a really great performance from RHR. Race-wise, didn't see too much of him. Obviously, his day ended with a bit of a bizarre collision with Scott Dixon. It kind of seemed Dixon didn't know he was coming. The gap RHR was trying to shoot. It was a bit unfortunate. But for a part-time team and a part-time driver, getting to the Fast 12, I thought was a great achievement. Yes, the race didn't quite pan out the way he wanted it to. But for the resources that team had, it was a great effort from RHR.
I don't know if we mentioned this last week, but I think if I didn't, then I would just like to say this was one probably the coolest stories of the season, really, that he made the cut into the Fast 12, because obviously leading up to the 500, there'd been all the talk. Now, obviously, we know that the charter will not cover guaranteed entries for the 500, but at this point, there was talk that, you know, there could possibly be guaranteed spots in the Indy 500 when the charter came to light. And I think this kind of just outlined the value of these Indy-only entries. And yeah, I mean, I would probably put... I mean, it's quite hard to say you put these drivers that did only the 500 any higher than sort of the middle, just given sample size, obviously. But I think Hunter-Reay had I think it was a really impressive run for a team that, you know, ultimately just puts all their focus, all their resources on May. And the race, it could have been better before the incident, but yeah, I don't know. Where do you think he deserves to go?
Middle.
I think I'd put him middle as well, because especially with the 500, if you're only doing the 500, you kind of have to weigh the qualifying as like hard as the race, because so much can happen in the 500. And actually, like the Fast 12, that's a huge achievement for someone only doing the 500. So yeah, I'd say middle.
Yep, I would agree.
Very nice. Let's put Mr. RHR, wherever he is, over there, the middle like Ohio.
I must say, actually, he did a good job to save it with that accident, because it could have been a much bigger crash. But, you know, he was on the grass spinning and somehow managed to get it corrected with, I think, even a bit of damage as well. So
let's get on to Hunter McElrea. Obviously did the one race in Toronto this season. He was stepping in for Jack Harvey. Again, not too much to say about McElrea. He qualified 25th and he obviously had to retire due to crash damage, basically, from McElrea. But I can't remember much from the weekend, to be honest. But I thought I vaguely remember his pace through the weekend being okay. It wasn't bad by any means. He did have probably a few too many accidents. He had one in qualifying. I'm tempted to say he might have had an incident in practice as well.
I don't think he had an incident in practice. He went into that sort of notorious, I think it was at turn 8, turn 9. A lot of drivers were getting caught out. So there's kind of no shame in that. Obviously, that's where Rossi had his incident that broke his thumb. You know what? Like, yes, okay, he didn't convert in qualifying. Yes, okay, the race. I don't actually know how it happened. I think he might have just had some wall contact that led to some damage that ultimately, I believe, led to a failure, if my memory serves me correctly. Of course, qualifying kind of made his race a bit of an uphill task, but I think given he was thrown in for his debut on a tricky, tight street course, he actually showed some pretty good speed. I think because obviously they had the split practice format in practice. I believe he topped one of those groups just because of several red flags in one of them. I think the speed he showed in the practice sessions leading up to qualifying in the race, which were a bit rockier, kind of give him something to build on.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, he was okay, wasn't he? I mean, it's hard to judge from the F1 race, which isn't the 500, because you don't have 2 weeks to analyze them. But I think the fact we remember that he was okay says something. I know it's a bit weird, but remembering how someone did in one race is okay. Look, and it was a bit messy. Crashing on his first lap of qualifying was not ideal. And obviously, if he retired in the race due to a failure caused by a crash, that's fine. But as you said, it's a hard street circuit, and it was his first race. He'd only done one test prior, so ground to build. And look, whether I see him again in IndyCar, who knows? But he's very funny on Twitter. If that means anything.
Yeah, I think it wasn't like an impressive performance, but it also wasn't like a bad performance by any means. So he did okay, I think.
Where are we going? I'd personally say bump day survivor. But
Yeah. I would say that as well.
we're all very unanimous so far. This is unusual. Maybe that might change for Colin
Once
Brown.
we get people who've done a few more races, I think that's gonna change.
Colin Brown did one which counted and one which didn't count at the streets of St. Petersburg. He qualified 25th, which was actually above Harvey, in fairness to Brown. And he finished 20th in the end. Look, he didn't do anything wrong, which in the 51 entry, I think was quite important, especially if entry was so predictable. Again, he was thrown in last minute. He had a test at Sebring, I believe it was, and he was sort of chucked in. And someone will know IndyCar experience being thrown again. Arguably, St. Petersburg is the most difficult race of the year from a physicality standpoint. You've got to bear in mind as well. And look, he kept it clean. You didn't crash or anything. So, not so much to say. It was just one of the 51 NPCs, one of the many of them.
Harsh. No, no. They had so many drivers, didn't they? I think Brown wasn't one of the kind of most spectacular drivers. I think you say he outqualified Harvey, but given he qualified 25th, I would imagine Harvey was in the other group, probably.
Maybe. I'll have to look at that. But
yeah, he obviously. I mean, he stayed out of trouble. I think he was on the lead lap for the majority of the race. This is racking my
how are
memory
you
from
remembering this? This is insane.
over 6 months ago. I believe he was on the lead lap for most of the race and maybe fell off it quite late in the race.
Yeah, I agree with that. Out of all the many coin drivers we had this year, he wasn't one of the ones who stands out in my memory. So
yeah, he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, the fact he's forgettable is probably almost a good thing. He didn't do anything wrong, right?
yeah,
So where's obviously middle or bump day survivor? I don't know. I'm not fussed about this one.
Don't know, depends how harsh we're going, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, he didn't do anything wrong, I don't think, which probably justifies middle like Ohio, but maybe the bottom of it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Middle like Ohio. Do you think? I would say bump day survived. I think McElroy did a better job than Brown.
Okay. Right, yeah. No, I agree. Okay, I agree with that. You've convinced me. We'll put him there. Yuri Vips did one race in Portland, like he did last. Well, he did two races last year, but he did one race this year in Portland. He qualified. Let me find that for you. 16th, and he finished 19th. Yeah, he did right. Again, this is quite hard for these sort of 5-10 because they did one race, but he was all right, wasn't he?
It is so difficult. I mean, he didn't reach those heights, did he, of Laguna last year, where he qualified 7th, I think. So, yeah, he didn't quite match that. Again, he wasn't. I think RLL since then have seemed to take a little bit of a step back. I think he was still relatively on par with his teammates. He qualified mid-pack at the end of the day. It's not like he's qualifying 25th or 27th. So, yeah. It's a tough ask since he'd been out of a car for a year.
Yeah, again, it's one of those. He was there, he didn't do badly. He stayed out of trouble. He was in the midfield, but he wasn't like in the top 10 or anything. But you also kind of don't expect him to be. So I feel like he did okay.
Below Hunter-Ray?
I think he survived bump day. I don't think you could put him in middle like Ohio. Okay. I don't think it.
We are harsh this year.
I think it's just kind of as I was saying before, like just because the sample size for these is a bit smaller, I think I would rank them slightly lower. Okay. We don't want to overcrowd the middle.
I also think it's quite difficult to put anyone who's done like one race higher than that.
Yes, I agree.
That will change in 3 positions time, but
it will.
Tristan Vautier, maybe the biggest NPC of all the coin NPCs. He got thrown in like 3 days before Detroit and was like, here's a seat from 7 years ago, which you last drove in, didn't fit him, so I had to redo it. That was a weird race. He got taken out by Herter. He was about a lap down like 4 times. Then he randomly ended up in 3rd place somehow, like through some strategy somewhere, and then finished 18th. I mean, I don't know, but
I will correct you. He wasn't taken out by Herta. He actually made some great avoiding
true, that is
action
true.
to
Okay, he was
avoid being
involved in an
taken out.
incident with Herta.
Yes, we'll put it that way. You know what? I would really quite like to put him in middle like Ohio, because this is a guy who hadn't driven an IndyCar for 7 years. I don't think he'd driven an IndyCar on a road course for 8 or 9 years. So to just step back in like he did, and again, this whole thing of coming in, making this return on a tricky track like that Detroit track it's pretty perilous. And he was on the pace, and I mean, to be running up in third, you've got to be doing something right, haven't you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that's like a decent. I'd definitely put him in the middle, like Ohio, because 7 years without being in an IndyCar and then being pretty on the pace relative to your teammate and like the rest of the field is impressive.
Fine, we'll put it in there. I still find it so funny how he got called up like 3 days before.
This was the most. There were some random ones, weren't there? I mean, Luca Giotto came out of nowhere, but Vautier was absolutely the most
This was
random.
core in its darkest day, because like, at least you got to a point where okay, you knew it was going to be Sarri or Leg by some point. But when we were calling up, I remember Carl Kirkwood just laughing in the press conference when Vautier just said, "Yeah, I got the call on Wednesday morning to come to Detroit," and Kirkwood was just trying to hold back his laughter when he saw it. Hilarious.
Oh, that was great. That was something we missed on Funny Moments, actually. That was brilliant. That was one of my favourite moments.
Yeah, that was rather funny. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think we'll ever see Tristan Vautier again, but did they say that in 2017? Quite possibly. So you never know. 2031.
2031. I was just going to say, I don't know exactly how old he is. He'll probably be mid-40s by then.
He will be 42. There we are. Maybe I see him back. But Tristan Vautier, of all the coin people, okay, he wasn't the most memorable, but the fact he ran in third, I find slightly amusing. How nobody knows how he ended up in third. He just appeared there at one point at one stage. So, Takuma Sato obviously only did the Indy 500. He qualified rather well. He qualified 10th, but that was because that's all he did for about 5 days, just practice qualifying runs. Race-wise, he finished 14th in the end, which wasn't quite a top RLL car, was it? I think Lundgaard might have been ahead of him. Lundgaard was ahead of him. But Sato was sort of brought in for the experience, wasn't he? He was brought to bring RLL forward. He had a rocket engine, according to Graham. Look, I guess they made a small step forward because they didn't get bumped this year, but it wasn't spectacular. But Sato was the best of the RLL cars all month, even if you had a rocket ship engine.
It's quite hard to quantify, really, because Graham obviously said he has this hell of an engine, but you've got to be doing something right, haven't you, to be qualifying 10th? Wow.
Qualifying all week.
Yeah, yeah, of course. But I mean, even then, having done barely any race prep to finish 14th in the race is pretty solid work, to be honest. So I guess the fact he was so far ahead of his teammates does kind of hint at possibly a bit of an anomaly, because it's not like Rahal, for instance, is a bad driver at Indy. In fact, he's a very good driver at Indy, and here he is finding himself in last chance qualifying 2 years in a row. So I don't know how to quantify where Taka is, to be honest.
Look, he was the best. I think even if he had a rocket ship engine, he was the best of the RLL cars. When he got into the Fast 12, we were like, well, that is some run from Sato getting an RLL into the Fast 12. Imagine saying that on Bump Day last year, that they'd have a car in the Fast 12. I think Taku deserves some credit for that. And look, he's got so much experience. And I mean, we can't put it all down to the team or his engine or whatever, because look, he's an experienced guy. He's on 2 Indy 500s.
Yeah, and you don't do that for nothing.
Yeah, and I think this is more like the performance you expect of someone who's only doing the Indy 500, for them to qualify well, for them to finish like roughly close to where they qualify. Like, this makes more logical sense for someone who's just doing the 500, and especially in comparison to teammates.
It slots up there with Hunter Ray, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, ahead of Hunter Ray, I reckon, because look, he finished the race on like Hunter Ray.
Yeah.
Right, the last driver who's done one race, but the most significant of them all, Kyle Larson. It's a bit weird because he finished 18th, which isn't great, but you've got to take into account this was his first time in IndyCar. This was his first Indy 500. He was quicker than all the other Aaron McLarens apart from Rossi. He qualified in the Fast 6 on his Indianapolis debut. He basically lost a good position in the race because he sped in the pits and he had a poor restart. He didn't really do much wrong. He didn't crash it all month, even though he only just stepped into an IndyCar. He was quick as anything. They want him back next year. I think that says quite a lot about Carl Larson. Look, I've raved about this month for a year because I thought how impressive it was. But yeah, great. I mean, I'm so glad he's back next year. I've said it a million times. I'm already looking forward. Is it May yet?
He's got that dog, hasn't he? I mean, he's like the definition. Obviously the race finish wasn't there, but I mean, there were times that month where it was pretty spellbinding. We were watching something pretty awesome. I mean, I know he really, really downplayed it at the time, but I stick by the fact that the open test was just super impressive. That was the first time he'd been out there with other cars. And okay, regardless of the fact he had a massive draft or whatever he said, a magic draft, I think he described it as, he topped the open test in April. And that for me is an achievement in itself. And yeah, continued that obviously through practice. He was just so unfazed by kind of the whole experience. And, it got to qualifying. He was like, well, the boost, yeah, I can't really feel it, to be honest. Gets into the fast 12, puts it 5th, goes off to do whatever other race. And yeah, obviously Indy was the race in the end was one of learning, wasn't it? And he was displeased with how the double attempt kind of panned out. And he's got the issues now out of his system, hasn't he? Such as navigating restarts. That's not the sort of thing you can really practice in practice or in the test. Pit speed violation, again, I think he'll probably be annoyed with that, but he's learned those key lessons, still impressed massively. Can't wait to see it all over again next year.
Yeah, I think the fact that he's even doing it again just shows how kind of insane in the best way he is. And I'm really glad he is, because I'm really looking forward to seeing it again. And yeah, he impressed from literally day one of getting in that car. And I think it was definitely something to watch. And again, all the mistakes he made were really small things that I imagine will be ironed out pretty easily. And yeah, I agree. He should definitely be in Got That Dog.
He's got the billboards. He's on all the billboards. Not quite billboard-worthy this year. A man, speaking of people who've been on billboards, Helio Castroneves. Obviously was only planned to the Indy 500, the number 6 car. Then I still think it was a bizarre decision to sub him in for Blomqvist, in truth. I thought that was a bit bizarre. I thought they should have just waited Blomqvist out 2 more races if they were desperate to get Malukas in, but it doesn't matter.
Agree. No, I completely agree. Still completely agree. I still feel strongly about that.
Indy 500 was unspectacular. Didn't really see him much. Detroit, he got into an incident with Simpson and Ferrucci, if I remember correctly. And then Road America, he had an off in qualifying, and that's pretty much all I remember.
So yeah, it's kind of back-to-back, slightly underwhelming 500s, I would say, for Helio. Obviously, you wouldn't expect anything on the road and street. Essentially, he's a retired road and street course driver. So yeah, that was just a strange decision. Just putting Blomqvist in, keeping Blomqvist in, has that rhythm, would have probably been the better decision, but it didn't matter in the end. He probably survived bump day, only just.
Yeah, agreed.
Bottom or probably. Where's Elio?
Yeah, I think this is where you get to kind of the start of measuring people against their standards, and we know obviously 4-time Indy 500 winner, you've got to hold him to a pretty high standard, haven't you?
49, in fairness.
That's true.
He's older than probably a lot of people's dads. So
he has a Ganassi car next year.
Yeah, we're not strong this year, but we'll see. Yeah, look, he's great to have. I love him. He needs to stay in the Indy 500 forever. But Luca Giotto, maybe the final boss of the Coin NPCs, did 4 races: Alabama, Indy GP, Road America, and Laguna. Qualifying wise, he qualified 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 27th, which is better than I thought, in fairness. Results wise, he was 21st, 25th, 22nd, and then 27th. He crashed by himself at Laguna. He had a spin, which caused a caution to GP. He broke Georgina's hand in Alabama.
I think that's what we'll remember. The Georgina incident is what we will remember him for the most, I think. I will be honest. I was doing my prep and I completely forgot he'd done 4 races. I thought he'd done the 2.
4. He did 4 races. So forgettable.
He'd done the 2, and then I forgot about the others, to be honest. But he was one that came in. It's a little while since he'd driven a single-seater car. A little while since he'd been in F2, and he wasn't awful. We had low expectations, and he wasn't. He wasn't off the pace, was he? And that's kind of how you've got to mark these kind of more random drivers that just step in. It's funny enough, his best result was his first race at Barber, where he decapitated the poor
Gina
man
gave
again
him
in
power.
sand. But
Nothing to say about him, is there? He
Very
crashed,
forgettable.
crashed a few times, broke Georgina's hand. Probably, I guess, bump day survivor.
I think so.
But behind Helio,
Yeah.
it was worse than Brown, I think. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah.
really. It's
No,
hard
he,
to
had,
say.
he had a few crashes, didn't he? So
True.
then we go on to Callum Ilott. Did 2 races, the season open on streets of St. Petersburg and the Indianapolis 500. We knew this would be a part-time gig for Callum whilst he's doing the World Endurance Championship. Obviously, he said to us at the start of the year he wanted to take these part-time opportunities. St. Petersburg was unremarkable, but not bad. I don't think he did anything wrong in St. Petersburg at all. He sort of did a job, got a decent finish, qualified 16th, finished 11th. Indy 500 was a bit better. Obviously, he was the weakest of all the Aaron McLarens, qualified 15th. But as we know, he had his weight jacker fail on the laps to the field, reconnaissance laps. That's what they're called. Pace laps, whatever they're called. Had a weight jacker issue and dealt with that really well. He had an incident with Kirkwood in the pits, from what I remember, but all things considered, I thought it was a good attempt from Ilott, considering the issues he was having throughout the race. And he had a decent month and did a decent job in St. Petersburg.
I forgot about the Kirkwood thing. I think, did Kirkwood get penalised for that? I think.
Yeah, it was a bit of a stupid penalty.
But
Ilott got sent out of his pit box, didn't he? He went
yeah,
to pit box
I remember it being an odd one. But, I mean, St. Pete, I think I was pretty short notice that he found out about that. So he stepped in, performed pretty well in a completely new environment. Did he test before St. Pete?
Yes, he did.
He tested once, didn't he?
Yeah.
So it wasn't completely new, but again, it was shorter notice than you would like ahead of the season opener. Then thermally was pretty quick. He topped one of those test sessions, I think. Then he was kind of there with Rossi.
I think he beat O'Ward and
he did, yeah. Which again is pretty good going. But I was really impressed by. I think Indy was really, really impressive. To have your weight jacker fail and you've just got a poorly balanced car for the entirety of the 500 miles, but he's so unflappable. He doesn't get flustered. He keeps a cool head, and to finish 11th when you also factor in the Kirkwood moment in the pits, one of the best performances of the season. I think you've got to say, all considered. I think he's got some unfinished business that it'll be cool to have him back to fulfill next year.
Yeah, definitely. I think his 500 performance was definitely impressive. I mean, I'm an Ilott fan, so I'm biased, but I'm very glad he's coming back next year because I'm really excited to see what he does. And I think it was a shame that he wasn't there full time this season. But yeah, I mean, pretty consistent, pretty on his teammates' pace, did well on short notice. I think he did really well, all things considered.
Miller got that dog.
I think if we've just got to factor in the fact we've got over 30 more drivers to come.
I say top of middle.
I think I would say top of middle,
Great.
but that's not to discredit his performance because I think he did a fantastic job.
Yeah,
And he came on the podcast, so he deserves the credit. That might be a theme. Ed Carpenter. Now, the decision to drop himself, I think, tells you the entire story of Ed's season. Didn't qualify well. Qualifying average of 22.5. Qualified last at Iowa 2. Qualified 25th at Iowa 1. Indy 500, he got outclassed by a rookie teammate. Got outclassed by VK. Was incident after incident. I know Iowa's weren't really his fault. He got caught up in 2 accidents. Gateway got into an accident with leg. Oh, it's just a disaster. And the fact he's dropped himself for next year as well.
I think we were having this conversation this time last year about pretty much the exact same thing.
You were.
Were we?
I was listening to it, and you literally said, "In the next few years, I think we're going to see him go."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember like last year it was at Gateway he punted Benjamin Pedersen, and it was just messy. And to be fair to Ed, he was also caught up in some incidents that weren't his fault this year. But I think part of that was the fact that he was running so low down the field that he was getting caught up in these incidents that routinely, we weren't seeing VK get caught up in them, were we? So, yeah, I think he has to go and bump through.
And Rasmussen did a much better job. All Rasmussen's 4 results in over, including the Indy 500, were all better than Ed's.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, he's bumped himself, so I think we can not feel too bad about putting him down there.
Yeah.
Our good friend Toby Sowery, another friend of the podcast. Yeah, he wasn't an NPC in the coin because he was quite good. People remembered him because he put in good performances. We've spoken to Toby about this before, but mid-Ohio, you had the weather, he had the lack of red tyres, you had the hybrid he'd never driven, he hadn't tested any yonks. It was a good 13th. Toronto wasn't as spectacular, but he finished 15th. He avoided the chaos in Portland. Again, good results, 17th. He raced really well against Kirkwood, raced really well against Siegel. Kirkwood said some comments, Townsend Bell was very strong to praise Sowery, even the race after at Gateway. Qualifying wise, qualified particularly I say well, but it's pretty well. It wasn't good, but for the coin context, it was good. Qualified 21st in Portland and Toronto. I qualified O'Ward at Portland, which is saying something. And it was better than most of the other coin drivers. I think he was actually the top coin driver for qualifying all year. So it was, yeah. For the mess they were in and the short notice that Toby got, and the fact that Dale actually asked them to do another race than they had planned, I think says a lot about Toby's season.
He did a superb job. I think he probably did as good a job at any of the other drivers that we saw at Coin throughout the year, to be honest, including those that were there for kind of the majority of it as well. I mean, yeah, we've spoken a lot, haven't we, about just how good those few outings were, but Mid-Ohio, there were just so many things kind of stacked against him, and it was kind of a proper, chucked in the deep end situation. But I mean, even qualifying, he was faced with an issue with his car. He didn't log any laps there after also, as you said, Dan, not logging any laps, particularly in opening practice because of the weather, but still gets through the field, runs with some really top guys, and yeah, finishes 13th, a result that wasn't topped at Coin at any point throughout the year by any other driver.
Yeah, I was literally going to say, I think even when he had things against him in the weekends, his actual racing, when it came to the races, was always impressive and was always like drawing eyes and having people talk about. His actual like wheel-to-wheel battles definitely got my attention and impressed me a lot. So yeah, I definitely think he deserves a good place on this tier list because of that.
Where's he going? I think got that dog.
I do. I agree.
Yeah,
Being a friend of the podcast as well. being a very good friend of the podcast. He deserves got that dog.
Gets extra points for that.
Another friend of the podcast, Tom Blomqvist. I mean, his season didn't go as well. And look, me and Archie have been very vocal about this where we think he was dropped too early because, look, he didn't start off spectacularly. He had a best finish of 15th for St. Petersburg, but the improvements were there. He was in the Fast 12 in Alabama. Yes, the Indy 500 was a bit of a disaster, but I like the decision to John was premature, especially when he was replaced by Helio. So yeah. I wish we saw more of him.
I just think the fact it was such a shock when it happened kind of said it. I mean, when it happened, everyone was thinking, oh, well, he must be injured. But then obviously it was reiterated, no, he's not injured. I still am slightly miffed. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was far too early. He's a rookie driver. He's not been in single-seaters for several years. And yeah, I mean, was he part of that decision? Was it, maybe not all he thought it was going to be? He did 5 races this year. Obviously, he did the 3 the year prior as well, kind of gearing up to this year. He hit the ground running all right in St. Pete, I thought, to finish 15th. And then, yeah, results such a Barber did show his progress. But I guess that team, knowing the upward trajectory that they were on this year, I think maybe they really wanted to pounce and make sure they do have 2 chargers and they've not got kind of one hand tied behind their back. And I think given more time, Blomqvist, I think ultimately Malukas was a better pick for them. But I think over time, Blomqvist probably would have come more into his own. Maybe they did make the right decision in the end because they didn't make the leaders circle emphatically in the end. It was still, Malukas obviously had a few issues out of his control. But yeah, I mean, I would have at least given him those 2 more races because I thought he did it wasn't a good job, but it wasn't like a horrible job for a rookie who's pretty, he's not done much high level single seater racing bar his few stints in Formula E.
I also think it would have made more sense if Malukas had obviously come in earlier at those instead of having those like 2 races with Helio. Like that would have made a lot more sense. And like, fair enough, you've got Malukas, like you want to put him in, go ahead. But to like get rid of him, then have Helio in for 2 races before, like why not just give him the 2 races?
Agree.
random decision.
Top of Bump Day Survivor, I'm thinking.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think that. I don't think that's bad at all.
No, it's impossible to switch.
And the thing
between.
is, as well, it's not like they've cut him loose and he's got nowhere to go.
No.
He's got a house there for the foreseeable, really. So, yeah, we'll see him back doing what he does best on the sports car scene, and I'm sure he'll win many more races and probably many more titles as well, because he is a badass racing driver, as they would say.
Third Brit in a row, Catherine Legg, obviously brought in by Coins to the Ovals. I still have no idea why they announced them one by one instead of just announcing that she do all the other races. But hey-o. The not great news is she had the worst overall average qualifying of anybody. The Indy 500 does skew that.
Yeah, that's true. I was also going to say she's got the worst overall qualifying of anybody, and she did a lot more over races than some of the Indy 500 drivers.
Yeah. Well, worst qualifying of anybody. Race wise, was a bit better average wise. Obviously, I mean, she had a few incidents of her own. Gateway and Nashville, for example. Indianapolis obviously was not her fault. That was a mechanical failure. It's quite hard to sort of judge because Coins Oval package was even worse than the road course package throughout the year. They got better towards season end, that is for sure. But I think even by her own admission, it was harder than she envisioned it being, which I think maybe says a bit.
Yeah, I think it's quite hard to judge her too harshly because I don't think she was brilliant by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, I mean, it's goodness knows how long since she was doing any sort of regular single-seater program. So I think we can cut her a bit of slack. And you look at races like that second Milwaukee race, finishes 15th. That's pretty good going. It just felt a few too many times we were seeing her kind of spin down onto the grass or something had gone wrong. And I really feel for her in terms of Indy. That's now 2 years in a row that something's gone wrong pretty early in the race. She's barely got to race. I think a big win from the year actually is kind of the partners that she's brought on board, obviously with Elf Cosmetics. I think that was pretty huge, and I hope that gets her a run at least at the 500 again next year. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't splendid, was it? But Coin weren't splendid, and I think if anything is outlined by where Coin were on ovals this year, is what a phenomenal job David Malukas was doing for them the couple of years prior.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think she did the worst in the world. I don't think she had a great year. I would really like to see her do the Indy 500 again next year, especially with like Elf coming in. I mean, there's so much money in the makeup industry. There's so many sponsors that she could bring in, which I would love to see her bring in. And that like introduction of more women in motorsport is never a bad thing. So I'd really love to see her do it again. But yeah, I just don't think it was the season she kind of wanted it to be with her appearances, which is a shame. But yeah, I'd like to see her do it again.
I'd probably say Bump Day Survivor.
I agree.
She was a Bump Day Survivor.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think like, oh yeah, of course she survived Bump Day. That was great. That was one of the highlights of the season as well. Her qualifying runs.
I'd say ahead of McElroy.
Yeah.
Personally.
Fair.
So we've mentioned as part of Catherine Legg's 2024 package, she had various different sponsors, including the Elf branding. Now, if you want to represent Catherine Legg and the Elf branding that was displayed throughout the season, you can head to Formula Motorshop and pick up a driver jersey, for example, as well as all the other IndyCar merch that's on the website. Formula Motorshop is the best place to get your IndyCar merchandise in the UK and the rest of Europe.
You can use the discount code 5BOMB, all one word, FIVEBOMB, to gain 5% off products on the FMS site. Visit the highlights on the DIVEBOMB Motorsport Instagram account for a link to an exclusive VIP section on the FMS store, courtesy of DIVEBOMB.
And you can head to the DIVEBOMB website where you will find a pink banner to take you directly to the Formula Motorshop website, or you can visit formulamotorshop.co.uk.
Stay tuned for exclusive giveaways, events, and other content.
Pay per share. Now, we won't go to the way he was jobbed because me and Arch did an emergency 40-minute recording on this.
We've been enough into the weeds here.
Yeah, we'll ignore all the nonsense in the number 6. When he was there, he was good. He did a good debut in Long Beach. Alabama and the Indy GP were a bit tougher, but they were always going to be. Detroit was the one that really stood out. He was probably quicker than O'Ward and Rossi pretty much the majority of the weekend. He reached the fast 12, he got a top 10. Obviously, that's where it all went down for Canapino, but it's a different story. But when he was in the car, for a rookie, I think he did a good job. I don't think he was incredible. He didn't set the world alight, but I think he definitely showed that he has potential and was making improvements. Obviously, it's a bit of a shame what panned out, but in the car, I thought he did a good job when he was in it.
I mean, you don't really see rookies doing much better than him. I know Colton Hurst, for instance, springs to mind. But yeah, I mean, given he's kind of, again, another thrown into that situation with not very much preparation to do as well as he did at Long Beach was good going. Again, these completely different tracks to what these European drivers are used to. It's bumpy. It's just incredibly tight. And they're used to the smoothness of Monaco, for instance. So I think to have his best performance in Detroit as well, he seemed really at home on those street circuits. I mean, he's been awesome at Monaco over the years as well. So maybe it doesn't come as a surprise that it was street circuits that he excelled most on. But yeah, I was impressed.
Yeah, I think I was too. I think especially when you hear the likes of like Marcus Armstrong and Callum Ilott talk about actually how difficult the jump from F2 to IndyCar can be, how difficult and like different the cars are, even though you think they have some like key similarities, for him to go straight into that and put out some pretty solid performances. And then as well, it was with Toronto with his really late notice call up, literally flying from France like to the States, getting in the car and then doing a like P14. Not a bad performance, not a bad weekend. So I think he did very well under the season he had, and I do hope he looks for a full-time Indy seat in the future.
Yeah. I mean, he put himself on the map. He really put himself on the map. People over in the US didn't know anything about him. We are absolutely not in the US, but people in the US didn't really know about him, and he's suddenly kind of on the map, isn't he? And Toronto, it is worth a mention because that was super impressive. Jet lag, no sleep, barely knew the track.
I still can't get over Kanan's tweet. What a weekend of tweeting Toronto was. Right, I'd personally say middle like a higher, but Islet sort of end, but I'm hoping to.
Yeah.
Behind Ilott, maybe?
I'd probably put him ahead of Ilott just for the fact it was a larger sample size that he delivered over.
And also I think the circumstances that he was put in for like Toronto put him ahead of Ilott for me.
Augustine Canapino. Now, looking back at Canapino's season, I feel like it looks worse on paper than it actually felt. I don't know how to say it, but on paper, his season was absolutely awful. When you look at it, like his average finish was the worst of anybody who did more than about 5 races. He had lower average finish than the likes of Harvey, Robb, Simpson, Fittipaldi. He didn't get any top 10s. He got dropped half through the season, but it felt like it was better than that. I don't know how to describe it, but
yeah, he finished outside the top 26 times in 11 races.
I just remember him being quite messy throughout the year. Yeah, Alabama, it was Long Beach springs to mind. Like the Furmore, I know means nothing for this, but did all right. And then they made a fast 12 maybe at Toronto, but he just felt that he was clumsy, which he wasn't last year, for example. We gave him a lot of plaudits for keeping his nose clean, and maybe he just got too confident. He just felt clumsy at times.
It was messy in a way that it really shouldn't have been in a sophomore season, I think. Because there were some genuine like sort of streaks of pace. I wouldn't say it was anything particularly consistent. I think consistency was an issue with him, but there were times where you kind of look at him measured up against Grosjean. I seem to recall, and you were thinking, okay, this guy's not a million miles off. He was pretty good on ovals again. He also qualified 10th in Iowa, the second race there, as well as Toronto. So, yeah, I think it was just always an issue of converting in races. Like a qualifying average of 17th that's not too bad, but he just wasn't getting it over the line in races, really. I think that was the big problem.
Plenum issue Indy 500 qualifying.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he was quick at Indy. I forgot about that, to be honest.
When drivers have done like one race, it's easier to weigh qualifying up with the race result. but when you've done the majority of a season, your race, how you end the race, is just as important, like arguably more important than how you qualify. And he can really convert that consistently.
Right, it's going on the bottom two. Which one?
I think towards the bottom of Bump Day survived. I don't think he was awful.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
I just don't think he made the step forward that we should have seen.
Where?
I'm struggling.
Somewhere here.
It's quite small.
Better than Giotto. Better than Castro Neves.
Yeah.
His replacement, Connor Daly. He had a good 500. That was his first initial ride. He got a bit screwed over in qualifying. Iowa with Coyne was completely irrelevant. And then Hunkotter did exactly what he needed to do, plus even more. Wood into leader circle, got Ricardo's first podium, got another top 10 at Nashville. He did a great job. Look, he's back in the market for next year.
Yeah, I rate his year really high. He was an afterthought. Like, he was a firm thought from teams as a super sub, but he was an afterthought for a full-time driver, and here we are. And he doesn't seem like he's out of play at JHR necessarily. Obviously, I think some things will have to line up for that to happen, but I think he was superb. I mean, 3 top 10 finishes in 7 races, I think he ran. When he wasn't inside the top 10, he'd either been punted or the car had failed. So pretty good going. And I think after all of the lists of people who are better than Daly and all the backlash on Twitter when JHR announced him as Canapino's replacement, I think a lot of people were made to look very foolish because they really underestimated, and really wrongly so, because Daly's such a reliable pair of hands on ovals and not on ovals as well. I mean, he was doing all right at Portland before he was hit by Pietro Fittipaldi, the torpedo. But yeah, no, I think just that podium at Milwaukee was certainly a highlight of this season. I think so poetic, as we kind of touched on last week, that he was the one to get Ricardo Juncos his first IndyCar podium after getting him his first car racing championship in 2010. So I would put Daly in Got That Dog, to be honest.
Got That Dog. He's got to go and Got That Dog.
Yeah, he definitely would, especially with that P3 finish. I think, again, in a similar vein, but not quite the same to Porsche, he went from being a driver who was not being considered, not really being talked about, and if he was being talked about, being kind of underestimated. And then he proved himself once he got in that car this season. And I think put himself back in the seat, or back in the idea of a seat in the future.
Connor Daly driving random things update, by the way. He was in the NASCAR truck race at Kansas at the weekend. I think he finished in the mid-teens, but he was running sort of top 10. And it's the Indy 8 Hour coming up as well. And Alex Palou is now confirmed to be driving in that. Daly's already driving a BMW, I think, in that. So that's one to look out for.
Ahead of Toby, behind Larson?
I would put him ahead of Larson, just because he did it across a larger size. Yeah, he did more and seemed to deliver every time he was on track, really.
Yeah.
I'm the Larson super fan, so I've got to get
Dan's not happy. That was a begrudging moving of Larson.
Not happy. Jack Harvey. It wasn't good. He was there to sort of bring the experience. And look, I don't think he performed anything of note really significant at all. Like, Coyne didn't make any improvements compared to last year. Harvey wasn't particularly quick. Sowry looked way more impressive in a lot less races. Yeah, it just wasn't a good year for Harvey. I don't think he did much wrong, but he just wasn't as quick as he should have been.
I just hate it for him because he's a good driver. Like, we obviously saw that at Meyer Shank and the RLL move. I mean, I'd love to get answers on what happened there, because I mean, he's gone from a driver contending for podiums to a driver contending for the last row of most weekends. I mean, it's pretty sad, to be honest. I'm a big fan of Jack. He's he always comes across as a really good guy. Obviously, again, for his British representation is always handy, but yeah, it was just, it's really hard to say with such instability at Coyne whether how much of the onus is on Harvey, how much of the onus is on the team. But when you see drivers like Sowery coming in and handily beating him, I think that's a bit of a worry. Obviously, I think he ended the season with a bit of a flourish, a bit more of a flourish at least.
Yeah, I think he was one of those drivers who had a season where he was just kind of there, which is unfortunate for him, but that's kind of just how it felt. Like, he was definitely driving and he was definitely on track every weekend, but that's kind of like it.
He had the lowest average finish of any, we'll say, full-timer.
Yeah,
I would personally go bumped.
I would go bottom of bump. They survived, but
We need more space.
maybe I don't think I'm brutal enough.
Yeah.
I think I'd go bumped. Top of bumped though.
Upper bumps, yeah.
I don't like being brutal.
It's got to be like, it wasn't the season that he expected. It was another chance for him, and I think even with all the 51 NPCs, like he was better, but not better enough to signify he had been an IndyCar driver for 5 years.
Yeah.
David Malukas obviously stepped in midway through the season for Tom Blomqvist and Helio Castroneves. It's a bit of a weird one, I think, for Malukas, because look, at the end of the day, he did exactly what he needed to do and put his name back on the map and prove to AJ Foyt Racing why he should be back in a full-time ride. It felt messy at times. Obviously, he had his own incident at Iowa, obviously had a few other incidents, but he qualified fast 12 straight away. He got quite a few top 3 qualifying performances in Mid-Ohio, Milwaukee, and Gateway as well. And look, if he won Gateway, he'd probably look at this with a completely different outlook. But he only got 2 top 10s, which feels weird because it feels like he should have had more. But it was, look, at the end of the day, as I said, he did exactly what he needed to do and prove to teams why he should get a full-time seat, which is quite important. And look, that's what he needed to prove at Shank. He got Shank into the circle, which I guess was his job. So he did well.
I'm just glad we got to see him, and I'm glad he landed on his feet really after, obviously, the events that we've covered at the start of the year with his dislocated wrist and just the disaster that was. That he's lost this opportunity at Aaron McLaren, but he's coming at Meyer Shank, pretty competitive. Like qualifying average of 9th across those 10 races that's pretty good going. I mean, he was in the fast. Did he make the fast 6 in his return, or was it fast 12 in his return?
Fast 12.
Fast 12 in his return. Then he qualified 3rd in his next race. Did he?
Mid-Ohio, yeah.
Yep. So I mean, he qualified 3 times. I mean, he again showed himself as a real oval maestro in many ways. And yeah, to come away with his best finish being 6th just feels really quite unfair, to be honest. I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say he probably should have won Gateway. He was taken out through no fault of his own. I mean, he was just awesome there again.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. I think it is really weird that his highest finish is 6th. Like, that doesn't feel right. I feel like we missed something, even though we haven't. Because I feel like his performance was a lot stronger than those results show. And especially when you think, not just coming off the back of an injury, coming off the back of the mental toll of losing a drive that he was really looking forward to in a way that was questionable, to say the least. Then to get a drive, immediately be on pace, performing very, very well, putting yourself in that position to be on the podium. Granted, it didn't work out, and get wins. Granted, it didn't work out. I think, yeah, I mean, I was impressed with him, to say the least. And I'm really glad he's got a drive for next season, because I think he deserves it a lot.
Got that dog?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd put him bottom of that.
Yeah.
But I think he deserves that, yes. At least it's some semi-silverware for him that he deserved and didn't get.
Yeah.
Nolan Siegel. Now, this is maybe one of the most difficult ones we've got today, because at the end of the day, he didn't qualify for the Indy 500. I know he was in a bad car, but he crashed it in the first place, and then he crashed it again in qualifying. Hunkos at Road America, we're going to ignore that because that's not fair to really represent anything at all. I guess he did an okay job.
He did a pretty good job there.
And then McLaren was, you would say it wasn't as good as Isla or Porsche did. He got a top 10 at Gateway, obviously. But there was a bit of clumsiness. Obviously, crashing in practice at Nashville was a bit of a disaster. He had a bit of a moment in Laguna. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because there's so many. He's driven for 3 different teams and been a bit all over the place. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think let's start at the beginning. Let's start Indy. Well, it was before even Indy, wasn't it?
He did
It was the
Long
beginning,
Beach.
actually. He did Long Beach, was again kept his nose clean, pretty, decent. Indy, it was just a tough situation. Like those coin cars were not good, and this
But
is
he did crash his primary time.
yeah, no, he absolutely did. But I think it's also kind of a consequence of not having another super speedway race ahead of the 500. Rookies aren't able to really get their eye in. Obviously you've got the open test, what have you, but it's a tricky situation that. Yeah, he obviously had that spectacular crash. I think just to bounce back, I maintain he left that with more credit in the bank than actually credit lost. To be honest, I think just the valiant way in which he just, it was I'll win it or I'll bin it, and okay, he put another car in the wall, but I'm sure everyone was pretty proud of that effort. Road America did well. I mean, he was pretty quickly on the pace, considering he had to just get out of an Indy next car and straight into practice. And then beyond that, I don't think anyone really expected massive amounts with Aaron McLaren. I think he told us it was all about the learning, really, and they'd maybe Monday morning quarterback it a few times and just go for it, Hail Mary.
Yeah, I think as well, like considering the stage Nolan's at, not just in his Indy career, but he's also very young. So he's doing very well, I'd say, for his age and the way he's coming into it this season. Yeah, even though, yes, he crashed the car in Indy Quali, it was still, again, like you said, win it or bin it. He really put everything out on the line, and it didn't work out, but it just as easily could have, And I definitely agree. He came out with a lot more credit than I think he lost at all. And yeah, I think this year was a bit of a learning year for him. And we know he's going to be there for a while now. And this was his chance to slowly build up, try to stay out of as much trouble as possible, figure out what's what, and next season come in and try and put in some good results.
Where's he going?
I would put him in mid as Ohio, but to the right of his 2 fellow Aaron McLaren drivers.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a bit lower because he didn't do as good of a job as either of them in that McLaren with more races, and he got bumped from Indy 500.
Okay, what are you suggesting?
I'd probably put him top Bondi Survivor, but he can go here. I'd say somewhere around there.
Who even is that at the bottom of mid as Ohio at the moment?
Vautier.
It's Vautier.
Classic that we can't tell who it is.
Vautier.
For context, listeners or viewers, our screen is extremely small. I've got it on half of my laptop, and then it's in a tiny little square.
Christian Rasmussen. Bit of a weird season, I think. Obviously, got the car into the leader circle, which is great. It felt like he was a bit messy at the start of the season. I'd say he had quite a few crashes, and across the year he was very clumsy. It's got to be said. Qualifying wise, he did okay, better than Ed, but is that really too difficult? Yeah, he was just a bit clumsy. Long Beach, he crashed by himself. Detroit had a mechanical, in fairness, but he punted into Ray Hill at Milwaukee, he punted into Simpson at Road America, and he had a few more incidents. 1 top 10 throughout the year. Yeah, I mean, look, it was a solid rookie year, but there's definitely stuff to build on. It could have been better, in my opinion.
It's a hard one because, I mean, not to start tooting the VK horn again, I think he did a fantastic job this year for a team that still isn't in a fantastic place. And I think Rasmussen, kind of all considered, did sorry, I'm just losing it at Dan making faces at me talking about VK again, but shoehorning him into an episode where we're not even supposed to be talking about it. But no, I think it was kind of just rookie things early in the season. I kind of expect to see that from a rookie. Kyle Kirkwood comes in with one of the best Road to Indy records ever in he was far from perfect with AJ Foyt racing early on. And I would kind of like, I don't think Rasmussen's of the Kirkwood echelon as such. Kirkwood was, very few drivers have had such a junior resume as him, but I would liken him a bit. And I think the way that Rasmussen, okay, he upset a few drivers, but he was certainly fireworks and certainly he showed some ability, and he did tidy things up, I think, later in the season. His last few runs in this kind of intended road and street program, he was qualifying well. He was making the fast 12. Mid-Ohio was good. He qualified 9th, stayed 9th. So that was I think that was a pretty mature run. And then the fact that he steps in, no IndyCar short oval experience. He's good on short ovals in the junior categories, but no experience of that in IndyCar. Steps in, immediately does a better job than his vastly experienced team owner. I was impressed. I was more impressed, I think, than you seem to be, Dan.
I kind of was impressed as well. I think a lot of the times he had mistakes and stuff, I would allow for a rookie. I'm not going to judge you too harshly for that in your first season. And actually, other than that, outside of that, he had some good finishes. I think he showed promise in moments. Like you said, he had moments where he upset some people and was a bit insane. But for the most part, I think he is showing promise as a rookie. And I think, there's good things to come from him, really.
I think Indy was some of the most fun I've had watching a driver this season. And I think also he provided one of the moments of the season with Ray Hall's points to the head and points.
Something he did wrong.
Yes, of course. But, something he supposedly did wrong.
His average street course finish was 25th this year, by the way.
Street courses were not good. But again, a lot of them were kind of earlier in the season.
Was he better than Siegel? I'd say probably when you take the 500 into account, I'd say
marginally, but then very, very similar. And I think Siegel's in better machinery, but that's kind of credit to Siegel, isn't it? Given he was supposed to be doing Indy Next this year.
Kiffin Simpson, obviously his first full year. Look, there weren't much expectations. He got one fast 12 in Road America. His average finish was 19th there and thereabouts. Average qualifying was 23rd, which again isn't great. Look, it was all about a year of learning and a year of building because he's here for the mainstay, but it wasn't flashy. I think it was what we sort of expected. There was a few rookie mistakes. There's stuff to improve on.
This is the hardest case of weighing up expectation versus potential of the equipment that he has. It's a hard one. It's very similar to Siegel. He is a young guy. He's not got much experience. It's hard to read into his junior results as such as his 9th, 10th in the championship in Indy Next, Indy Lights, because he's just quite a lot younger than some of the people he's competing against. And, age can just be a number, but, also he's, got a long way to go in terms of development. I don't know, maturity. He strikes me as quite a mature guy, but we marveled early in the season. Marveled, is probably the wrong word, but we were impressed early in the season by kind of the way he was keeping his nose clean and bringing home some pretty solid results. And then he has a 4-race stretch where everything just goes wrong for him. And he made some errors through the year. He probably made less errors actually on the whole than Rasmussen. I don't know. I don't remember Rasmussen binning it massive amounts.
Long Beach, he crashed by himself. Simpson crashed himself at Gateway and Toronto and one of the Milwaukee's. I think better than Canapino. Maybe better than Leg here.
Yeah, I'd put him better than Vips as well, to be honest.
Yeah, I would.
Ooh, I wouldn't.
Who's to the left of Vips?
Blomqvist.
I'd put him better than Blomqvist as well, because I think you just give him...
but Simpson made... Blomqvist made one big mistake, but Simpson did make quite a few of his own mistakes.
Yeah, but also
And is in the Ganassi.
Yeah, but Simpson did longer, more races.
He's in a Ganassi, but like the expectations were like on the floor from most people. And I think compared to those expectations, I think people were expecting him. And like, I don't think we were in this boat, but some people were acting as though he was going to be like, seconds behind the field. I think in terms of like related to what people were kind of painting the picture to possibly be, I think it was better.
Okay. I'd put him lower personally, but I'll stick with the floor. Right, Stingray Rob, disaster. I mean, look where Ferrucci was. Look where he was. He spoke about the sophomore slump. He didn't improve really on year one. Too many incidents still. Like his overall qualifying was not good. It was the worst of any full timer by some distance. I think when he qualified behind Porsche at Toronto, I was like, wow, that's.
Yeah, while we're on the theme of qualifying, he qualified 24th or lower 12 times in 17 races.
Yeah. Look, Ferrucci didn't qualify well, but Rob didn't. Ferrucci got pole, but Rob wasn't even close to Ferrucci. I mean, his best qualifying was 16th in Nashville. Other than that, it's 21st. One qualifying inside the top 20.
I think he did improve very, very marginally, but I think marginal improvement is simply not enough when your teammate is like so far ahead in pretty much every race. Like, yeah, he finished inside the top 15 2 times. His teammate finished inside the top 10, like a team record 11 times. The disparity is just wow.
Yeah, I think it was also just like too many issues, too many mistakes consistently. And like, yeah, even if when he did improve in the latter half of the season, it was barely, and there were still issues going on.
He's behind Harvey for me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all okay. That doesn't seem too controversial.
The thing is, I hate speaking ill of these people. Like, Stingray's great. He's such a fun and just great guy. But yeah, I mean, he'll be disappointed with his own season. I'm sure he will be.
Pietro Fittipaldi. I didn't think this was a good season for Pietro.
He's driven like very few of these tracks. Like he might have driven 5 or 6 of them. 75% is maybe a little bit high, but he'd done an oval stint with Coyne. He'd done a couple of the road course races, I think, a handful at best. Like he was coming in as well, having been majorly on the sports car scene in recent years. He'd been out of a single-seater car for best part 3 years.
But I know RLL are terrible. This is a guy he's been in and around F1 for several years, has got a lot of experience driving a lot of different cars. His best finish was 13th, which was the worst of any full-time driver. In qualifying, he was absolutely nowhere near the pace of his teammates. Rahal had an average of about 16. Lungar's average was about 15. His was 21st. And best finish of 13th, I don't think is particularly good either. Like I don't really recall him doing much wrong, in fairness. I don't really remember him having many incidents by himself. But the speed really was not there.
Yeah, he didn't have the pace, did he? I think it was Milwaukee qualifying, wasn't it? That was most damning with that both of his 2 laps slower than Louis Foster's Indy Next pole average. Like, and I know that's kind of an indictment on those RLL cars just being poor on those late season ovals. But yeah, I think the fact that he just didn't do anything notable is, I guess that is probably my main reflection on this season, to be honest. I mean, his best finish of 13th, he finished 13th twice. The first of those came at St. Pete, and that was the first race of the season where there was quite a lot of attrition. So,
yeah, I think the comparison between teammates is what does it for me, because he just was not on their level. Really.
He had less points than Harvey did in Harvey's last full season at RLL. So
yeah, that's not great.
Yeah. He's got to be bump day survive. I think maybe bump's a bit harsh because, as I said, he didn't really crash at all, and RLL were slow. and he was a rookie in a lot of places, but he still wasn't very good. So
Agreed.
he is somewhere.
Yeah, that looks fair. For those listening, he's going middle of bump day survive.
His teammate Graham Rahal, again, RLL were awful. Graham is. It's so hard to say what RLL were because look, Lundgaard was not as good as he was last year. Graham was not as good as he was last year. There is obviously a team issue. With Graham's experience, would you expect him to do a bit better? I'd quite possibly say yes. This one's difficult because, again, I don't think Graham did much wrong. He got very unlucky. Look, we know the 500 was still not very good. I mean, he qualified in the top 12 7 times this year, which is a lot more than I thought he did. He got 5 top 10s through the course of the year. Like, it's so hard. This is so hard. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. A guy for his experience, he'd never crash out by himself. He got unlucky being caught up in a few crashes. Rasmussen's, for example, Laguna Seca. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
This is one of the hardest, I think. I categorically do not think he had a bad year. Like, looking at him as an individual driver, I don't think he had a bad year. But on paper, it's his second worst of his career, the worst since 2014. Like, yeah. It's hard to put it into words.
I'd also say, if you look back at Graham's year, is there anything memorable that he did?
There's nothing memorable that he did, but again, he didn't really do anything wrong. It was just constant. Like, I lost track of the amount of times that we heard on ovals that the car wasn't pulling. We again heard that it was the worst car he'd ever driven on an oval. The balance was always wrong with his car. Like, he wasn't happy, was he? And he still finished inside the top 10 5 times. I don't know if you've got to hand how many Lundgaard got, but
I do. Give me just 1 second. Lundgaard had 7. No, okay, ignore me. He had. No, I can't count. He had 5.
Okay, so he did exactly the same as Lundgaard in terms of top 10s. He had, to be fair, I think, thinking about it, he had so much bad luck. Yeah. It all went wrong for it. I think I'm not going to say it too harshly because I think he just had so much went wrong for him that wasn't his fault. And their cars, it was a write-off of the season for them, pretty much.
Yeah, he's from Ohio, so. I think it suits him somewhere ahead of Rasmussen. Yeah,
I'd put him ahead. Yeah, I'd probably put him ahead of RHR.
I mean, he almost failed qualifying for the Indy 500 again.
Yeah, it's hard it's kind of difficult not to fall into that trap of comparing his Indy to the Indy drivers, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah. We'll put him there. I think that's fair.
Okay. Yeah.
Right in the back. We'll go on to just 2 more. Roman Grosjean, obviously, his first season for Juncos. We put him in bumped last year. He won't be in bumped this year. Andretti was a bit of a car crash. He found a nice home at Juncos. I think he did. I said this last week. I think I ended up cutting it out, but I think he did a solid effort. He got 6 top 10s at the time. He got Juncos' best ever result with Laguna Seca. Yes, there were still some crazy moments, like Portland, for example. But his overall package wasn't too bad. Road course package was all right. And he wasn't in the headlines for the wrong reasons as much this year.
He didn't outshine what Ilott did the year prior, though. A year further on in Juncos' development. Like, he was a place lower in the championship. I think, did you say he was something like 6 points lower? So it was a pretty much identical season over kind of the 17 races. I mean, there were great flashes. I think there was still the issue of he's not a consistent driver, particularly. I think he struggles a little bit for consistency. Like, I think he finished inside the top 15. He finished outside the top 15 6 times. That's probably the easiest way to put it. Like, all bar 2 of his top 15 finishes that he actually got were top 10s. It was kind of a bit of an all or nothing season, really. He either was up there near the pointy end, well, not near the exact pointy end, but inside the top 10, or something went wrong, which kind of is quite fitting for him. But I think he did a good job.
I feel like he's kind of where I expected him to be. in a like a weird way. Like I don't feel like he exceeded my expectations, but equally like I don't think he did horribly. Like yeah, he was inconsistent, but I mean I didn't really expect heaps from him.
He's going in the middle, I guess. Where somewhere he's better than I said a better season than Graham.
I would put him ahead of Sato and Hunter Ray as well.
Yeah.
I agree. Right, final one for this episode, which might be the hardest. Linus Lundqvist. 1 pole, 2 podiums, 4 top 10s. But it was messy. And there were when I'm doing this, I'm thinking, how did I expect Lundqvist to perform at the start of the season? Was I underwhelmed or was I surprised at his performances? And it's quite hard to say because he had so many great moments. By the end of the season on the ovals, he was actually qualifying better than both Dixon and Palou were, which I think deserves a little mention. But it was just a bit messy at times. It took him a while to get up to speed. It felt like he had a few crashes by himself. Indianapolis obviously being one of them. He had a crash at Milwaukee by himself. He had a few unlucky moments, but Iowa he had a mechanical failure. It's really like he had a bad luck at Road America, obviously, and I still think he got a decent result of 12th there. So this is really hard because he's in the Ganassi, and he was seen as this. Wow, we've got talent here after his shank performances last year, and for the majority of the season, he was quite underwhelming. But for 25% of the season, he was, wow, this guy is it. This guy is that guy.
I think my perspective on this is if it wasn't for his kind of 3 races with Shank, I think he qualify 11th, 11th, 12th, or 11th, 12th, 12th, or something. I think we would have looked at this year a lot differently. I think we would have looked at this year if it wasn't, well, first of all, this year wouldn't have happened if it wasn't.
I was about to say, we can't really say it didn't happen because.
But just like the hypothetical, if that was to be the case, I think we would look at this year as being a lot better than we probably look at it now. To be honest, like, I mean, I think it got a lot better as the year went on as well. Like, there were certainly highs. I think there were too many lows. I think he's admitted that himself. Like, I mean, Barber was a funny one because he attributed that mostly to strategy. Gateway less so, I think. He properly raced his way kind of to where he ended up. He ended the season with 9 finishes inside the top 15. It's all right. Like, for a guy was regarded so highly driving a Ganassi car, it's probably not quite as good as you would expect. But I mean, Road America as well. Like, I mean, obviously we won't know whether he would have definitely got the pole if it wasn't for Newgarden crashing. But like, that was still pretty. That was an awesome performance. Like, in pretty torrid conditions. Like, yeah, it's challenging, but I think he ended the season well.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like he's another case of there were moments where you were like, okay, in the next few seasons, like he'd really show something impressive, but he just had that inconsistency or like issues that stopped him from having that the entire season. But those moments where he did, I mean, like 2 P3 finishes, anything to be ignored. And I think he did fairly well. Granted, he had some not so great moments.
I mean, it must be a few years since we've had a rookie get 2 podiums in their maiden season.
Probably. Yeah, it did.
So that's good stuff. Like, and I as you kind of said, Fleur, I could see him coming back for a second year and properly hitting the ground running, being like, this guy's maybe not the real deal yet, but getting kind of on a path to that. And unfortunately, we're in like this weird, brutal market where he probably might not end up in the field, which is beyond harsh.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that he might not be there next year, because I would say this season is definitely deserving of another season, at least, to see if he can iron out those issues and turn those like flashes of greatness into more of a streak.
If you're a team owner and you see a driver who's got a pole and 2 podiums in his rookie season and made improvements towards the end of the season, that's great. That's what you want from a team owner. But it's a shame he won't get a seat because I think he's deserving of one. But it's just an odd year. But I think probably overall we need to put him in the middle somewhere. There were definitely times he had that dog. There were definitely times he probably should have been bump day survivor for his performances. So he'll go in here. I'd probably say upper end, maybe here. One of these.
Yeah,
I put him at the top.
Yeah.
I think he impressed me more than Push. Yeah.
Definitely.
But yeah, that is the first half, obviously. So stay tuned next week for the second half. But there is the full list of the first half. Obviously, the next episode will be really in the top 3 categories for most of the episode, probably all of the episodes. So that's what we got for this week in regards to the driver tier list. So that's great. And obviously, we've got a few things to go over very quickly. The first of all is the Ed Carpenter news. Obviously, first of all, they got this new owner from Heartlands Food Group named Ted Geloff, who's now a co-owner and a big investor into the team, which has supposedly allowed them to sign Alexander Rossi into the team. We actually spoke about this a bit last week. It wasn't confirmed. We also said it was going to be Stingray Rob. That's turned out to be Christian Rasmussen. He's now going to be in the 21 full-time. Rossi's going to be in the 20 with Ed Carpenter back for the 500, as we sort of expected last week. So I said this last week. This feels like a Rosenfish Shank sort of move, a proper team leader, somebody to lead him forward. Rossi says he's on more than a 2-year deal. So there's definitely an inkling for the future there. This investor's obviously like a big attraction for Rossi and his team. And yeah, as I said, a Rosenfish Shank style move where he's definitely expected to be a team leader and one they will build the team around.
Yeah, I think it certainly feels like, I guess, a new dawn almost for the team. Like, it seems like this is a real project, given it is multi-year deals for both. Obviously, yeah, Rossi, it is quite like Rosenfish to Shank, I guess. He's kind of an experienced head that's attempting to guide a team. Obviously, it's been around for a bit longer than Shank Racing, but back to the heights that, well, they have reached in the past. I mean, it's been a struggle really ever since Newgarden left, getting on for a decade ago. They've never managed to match the 4th place championship finish he got in 2016. And yeah, I mean, Rossi feels like the sort of driver that could bring wins back. I mean, Rossi's won what, though? Once in the last 5 years. I still think he's top level. I think that's more been circumstance than anything else. And I mean, he gives them a great shot at Indy as well. We know how quick they are at Indy. I mean, he's long been the best guy on the free agent market. And just to delve into Rasmussen as well, I mean, I think it makes sense keeping him over VK. Like, Ed Carpenter Racing has been a development ground for drivers over the years, and VK's been there for 5 years. Like, I think it's harsh to say he's overstayed his welcome, but like, it feels like he should have moved on last year, maybe even the year before. Like, Rasmussen is kind of, you know, we've spoken about him now, haven't we? But he's shown real potential, I think, and I think he's certainly a guy I can really see kicking on, and the team clearly believes in him. Ed clearly believes in him, as shown by the back end of the season with what he did on the ovals. So you've got this new investment on board, and I mean that's huge for the team, getting that investment. It's not just any investment. This is major investment as well. Like, we were talking last week about probably having to get a paying driver in to facilitate that Rossi move, but no, like, they've managed to get 2 drivers at completely free choice to them because they are now able to pay their drivers with this investment. And, you know, looking at last year, the 21 had bare side pods for most of the year. And I just think this is a really pivotal kind of moment for the team. And it will be, really important moving forward for, you know, a team that is one of the series kind of modern stalwarts, I guess.
It feels like the winds have changed a little bit for them, and this is like a really good decision and a really good direction. Yeah, having that experience of Rossi, and even if he's not necessarily at the level that he used to be, you can argue, or even if he hasn't had a win in years, he still has that experience and that knowledge behind him that is just as useful, especially for where the team is now. So I'm really interested to see where it goes really for them.
As I said last week, sticking with VK isn't ambitious. The 12th to 14th in the standings or whatever is great. But if you keep VK forever, you're going to finish 12th to 14th in the standings for years to come. Where Rossi, it's worth taking that risk. Or actually, I might finish 9th in the standings instead of 12th to 14th. So, yeah. Rossi would lead the team forwards. A bit of investment would be good. I think Rasmussen is a good driver, a good second-year driver. Again, a bit of ambition, see what he can do. I think it'll be a very much improving year. See how he stacks up against a more established name in Alexander Rossi, which will be good to see. And look, Rossi is here for the long term, so we'll see how that pans out. Leaves his future secure, and the 500 will be a big selling point for him. So we'll see how it pans out. But I think that's a really exciting move for the team in particular, and Rasmussen as well, because look, his future relies on having a paid drive because he can't afford it. So it's good news for him as well. So it's nice. Anyway, as we did last week, we got some history to do. I gave us 1905 to 1910, I believe, with my stories of Louis Chevrolet and the unconfirmed champions. So Archie, I will now pass the baton over to you to take us from 1910 to 1915.
Well, I mean, this was a significant period. Let's just put it that way, because the first Indianapolis 500 was run in 1911, which is, well, one of the most significant moments in IndyCar racing history. IMS had opened 2 years prior in your period, Dan, in 1909. But for this first 500, there were 44 cars. I think 46 were entered, but 44 turned up. 40 made the speed requirement, which was 75 miles per hour. It was a guy called Carl G. Fisher who was at the heart of the creation of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And along with some partners, he purchased what was a 328-acre tract of farmland for only $72,000. And, well, he initially wanted a 5-mile circular track, but that initially changed to a 3-mile rectangle. And, you know, from the start, there were plans to have this road course in the infield, but concerns kind of brewed about grandstands and fitting all of that in. So the length was eventually reduced to what it is still, 2.5 miles. And yeah, within, well, this is going back to 1909 in your segment, Dan, but I thought this was interesting. Within 3 months of construction, starting in March 1909, the first event was hosted there. Any guesses what the first event hosted there was?
It was a balloon event, some two balloons?
It was a hot air balloon race or event of some sort on June the 5th, 1909. The first actual auto races were held there that August. But yeah, going back to 1911, there were, well, riding mechanics were still a thing for the first Memorial Day 500 back in 1911. Ray Haroon won with help of his riding mechanic co-driver. He was one of 11 drivers to actually utilize his co-driver. Another bit of trivia, how long did it take for winner Ray Haroon to complete the 500 miles?
5 hours and a half.
Took him almost 7 hours at an average speed of 74.6 miles per hour. And he was a one and done. He never competed at Indy again after that. So, I mean, he's forever going to be a defending winner, I guess. But yeah, the following year saw a gentleman driver called Ralph Mulford run for nearly 9 hours. So this was a proper endurance event back in the day. But this is where we got to the fun part of my fact, which is him and his co-driver had a dinner break during that 9 hours. Then they when they got back out for the final 17 laps, they actually took a snack on board with them with darkness looming. So essentially the reason they kept going was because they needed to complete the 500 miles for the $1,200 prize money for finishing 10th. And 1 year later, Jules Gu, the first foreign winner, reportedly drank some champagne during multiple pit stops.
So did lap cars not exist then?
I don't know. I did this in a hurry on the train back from uni. So
well, I'm just interested. Maybe lap cars didn't exist then.
We'll do some future research. But yeah, my fun fact is that dinner breaks and in-race snacks and even champagne were consumed in the early Indy 500 races. And credits for this story is to ESPN and John Oriovich, who put together this piece to mark 100 years of the Indy 500 back in, I think it was 2011. So yeah, there's your 1910 to 1915.
Thank you very much. Fascinating. So I'll be back on the baton next week. In the war period, which will be interesting. But we'll see what comes to that. Yeah, we'll see what comes to that. But that's all we've got time for on episode 1 of our drive review. Bit of a bumper episode, but it had to be because of my favourite episode of the year. So absolutely no excuses not to be. Thank you for both of you for joining me. Obviously, we'll be both back next week, so we'll catch you both then. But that is all we've got time for this week. So feel free to send your own tier list at the end of next week. I'll share it out and the link in the description. But that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we will see you next time.